Hey everyone, welcome back to the Biotech Project. We're really excited as always to be back with you again today for another great episode. We have a really stellar guest today. We're really pumped to talk to. So I think you're really going to enjoy this episode today. Just as a reminder, you can always find more information about us, the podcast, and our guests at thebiotechproject.com. Of course, we're on all of the major platforms. You can find us on your social media by searching the Biotech Project as well. So with that, I'll flip it over to Scott, and maybe you can break the seal on who our new guest is today.
Thanks, John. This is the other half of your hosting duo, Scott, with you. Very excited to have a Amazon best-selling author with us today, Greg Novarro, somebody who's going to talk to us about really the entire process of getting through one of the most difficult parts about a career in the industry, the interview, and navigating that, as well as a number of other things. So we'll be back in a few seconds here with our guest, Greg Novarro.
You want to break into and navigate your career in the pharma and biotech industry. We know how to teach you. This is the Biotech Project. From sales to medical affairs and everything in between, we're talking about it. No matter how you got here, from here to your next role is up to you, and we're here to help. You'll hear from guests in every role, from CEO to sales, recruiters to hiring managers. The Biotech Project. Here are your hosts, Scott Resnick and Dr. John Walsh.
All right. Welcome back to the Biotech Project. So as I mentioned, our guest today is Greg Novarro. Greg is a award-winning published author in the industry with many years of experience. And so without further ado, instead of me trying to talk about him, I'm going to let Greg give us an introduction. So Greg, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Dr. Walsh. Appreciate you guys having me on today. And I'll just give you a kind of a brief update on kind of who I am, where I've been, and what I'm doing now. And I've been in the industry for 25 years, started as a rep many years ago, worked my way up, went to several different companies, was promoted to district sales manager, had been a account director in managed care, worked in government affairs, became a regional sales director, was in marketing, and then went back to be in a role of a manager because that's what I truly love to do. Been with 6 or 7 different companies, and that's kind of what led me to my side business, which is obviously writing books and coaching people on the interview process. And it all kind of happened by accident. But I'm grateful that it did happen, and I love helping people try and really reach their goals, especially during a layoff.
That's awesome, Greg. And it's interesting that you bring that up, because Scott and I really got into this discussion, and hence the reason we're here as a result of changes that caused downsizing for us. So it'd be really interesting to hear how you've taken those experiences and then translated that not only into your own reinvention, but how you've translated that out for other people and some of the things you're doing now. Yeah.
Perfect, John. So gosh, it was back in 2016. I was in my 4th layoff, kind of just really trying to figure out what I was going to do. And someone called me from Sepulchre, where I knew Scott from, and said, "Hey, I know you've been laid off several times, and I was wondering if you could help me out." I'm like, "Sure, I'll help you out. No problem." He goes, "No, I want to pay you." He goes, I go, "Pay me? Why are you going to pay me?" He goes, "Because you're going to take it more seriously." And I thought, you know what? He's got a really good point. I will take it more seriously if someone's paying me to do this. And one thing led to another. I helped that person get a job. And I thought, you know what? I'm laid off. I might as well see if there's other people out there like that. And it really just took off from there. And I think I only had at the time like 1,200 LinkedIn followers. Now I have almost 14,000.
Wow.
So it didn't take that long. And while I was doing that, while I was coaching people and I was still looking for a job myself, I felt like it was Groundhog Day, and I kept telling people the same thing over and over again. And so I'm sitting there on my computer one night. My wife's like, "What are you doing?" "We're watching TV." "What are you doing?" Like, "Oh, I'm writing a book." She goes, "That's stupid." And I go, "Why is that stupid?" She goes, "Because then less people are going to hire you to coach them." I go, "Well, eventually I can't keep coaching the amount of people I am right now. I'm going to get back in the industry. I'm just not going to have enough time. This will save them a lot of money too. And then I can really just focus on the part that I love, which is the interview process." So in my book, I was just trying to teach them all about LinkedIn, how to network, how to redo your resume, all those things that would take up probably about a good 2 hours worth of my consulting time. And then also throw in some interview stuff there that I could put in a book, and then really focus on the individual and their unique needs when I do the one-on-one coaching. And so what turned into hey, I just want to do this so that I don't have to spend 2 hours on the phone and save people some money, became an Amazon bestseller in the
That's
first month
awesome.
that I
Great.
launched it. Yeah. And now I'm on my third edition of that same book, because LinkedIn keeps changing, things keep changing. I keep
Well, why don't
adding
we
to it.
take a second and show our audience, while you maybe describe the book, where they can find it on Amazon?
Yeah. It's Acing the Sales Interview, third edition. And really in it, there's 134 pages. I think my first version only had about 100 or 117, I believe, or 107, something like that. And in it, I kind of tell my story. I talk about redoing your resume, about really how to network differently. And I always tell people that the key to getting a job in this industry is networking, and not in the traditional way that you typically do it, not just in people you know, but in people you don't know, especially. And LinkedIn has really changed the game. And so I focus a lot on LinkedIn and how to use that as a way to get you into a lot of different companies. And there's a lot of different aspects to LinkedIn that people don't know about. And also how to reach out to folks on LinkedIn, even if you don't know them, how to build up your network, how to write articles, how to post, a lot of different things on there of how to really make yourself look different. And then, of course, the phone screen, face-to-face interview, and then really telling a little bit about the sales industry. And I've also added a place in the back about kind of how to sell a pen, because that's been that often comes up on how to do that and during the sales process, and how to get through that scenario.
It's so funny you say that. My very first pharma interview, that led to my very first pharma offer, I was handed a pen and told to sell it. And it was bizarre. I thought, what does a pen have to do with selling an antibiotic or a drug for erectile dysfunction? But
all right, so you guys have to help me. I'm the medical guy in the room, have never done that kind of interview. So what does that look like when somebody just hands a pen your way? So maybe you can give me the cliff notes just in case that ever happens, but kind of cool.
Well, in any situation, really, to sell anything, it's all about understanding your customer, understanding what they're going to do. So it all has to do around asking good questions. Like, what are they going to be using the pen for? And what industry are they in? And where they, in today's society, what could mean a difference between making a deal or not making a deal, could be whether that pen is even working or not. Like, what are they going to be using it for? And where could they potentially see themselves using the pen? So it's not only about the pen itself, but it's more about what are its uses, what are they going to be looking for, what are they going to be doing with it, and then trying to really figure out the needs of that customer to then say, well, here's the perfect pen then for you. What you described for me is you're going to be doing this. This is what you're going to be needing it for. And then here's the opportunity of what I have. It seems to fit exactly what you're looking for. do you want to purchase this now that it's in front of you here, whatever it might be. So there's a lot of different aspects to it, but it's mostly about asking good questions, and any sales about asking
That's
good
awesome.
questions and
Great
understanding.
insight. Now, if without peeling back the curtain too far, because of course we want people to take a look at your book. If you had to pull out what is one or two key pearls that people need to know about acing that interview, what would you throw at them?
So the first thing I tell people is don't wait until the last interview. A lot of people wait for help to contact me, and the first thing I ask them is, well, what part of the process are you in? And they're like, well, I'm on the final interview. Well, I can't do a lot of help I can help people even if they're going to a final interview, but really the key is, and I tell people, is be the number one choice from the start. And it usually means really showing your differentiation even to the recruiter, even if it's an outside recruiter, if it's an internal recruiter. If you are being evaluated from the very moment that you get on that phone with that first recruiter, and too many people just say, oh, it's just a recruiter. I have no problem getting through recruiters. I have a problem getting to the final interview. And I always state, well, you're being judged from the very first moment. So it's not about getting through the recruiter. It's about being the number one choice, being the number two choice from that recruiter from the very start. Because it's harder to make up ground once that recruiter's already told the hiring manager, hey, I have 5 people, and here's the 5th person on my list, ranked 1 to 5, and guess what? You were the 5th person. And they've got an idea in their head already of where you stack. You're stacked ranked from the very beginning. And so I've helped people who have been on the final interview 17, 18 times, and their problem was they weren't differentiating themselves from the very beginning. And there's steps that you can take to make yourself different than everybody else during that process. I coach to really helping people demonstrate really good sales techniques from the very beginning, that if they're doing these things on the interview, the hiring manager and the recruiter will think, wow, if they do this on the interview, they're more than likely going to be like that.
So if somebody reads your book and they say, okay, this is great information, but it's not enough. Somebody reaches out to you. What does that look like? I mean, what can somebody expect when they reach out to you for services?
Very good question, Scott. So what I do is, the book gives a good roadmap, and people have done it on their own. They have gone through the process and gotten hired just by reading the book. But what I typically do is say, okay, you've read the book, you know how to do STAR questions, because that's another real key part of the book, is how to break down STAR questions, because that's the situation, task, action, result. But how do they tell their story? How do they tell their why? How do they tell their how? And I take what they're telling me about them, and we make good stories out of those. And so oftentimes people don't know how to tell how they've been successful. And so you may be asked the question, hey, tell me about how you've been successful in your last role. Well, a lot of people don't give enough detail. A lot of people will just use very basic things and say, well, I just work harder than everybody else. Or, I started in this role. I, work until 9 to 5. I work harder than everybody else. I make more calls than everybody else. And it just kind of happened. I just made more calls and impacted more doctors, and I built better relationships, and that's how I won it. Well, that's not going to get you a job. They have to know exactly what you've done from step 1 to the final end of the step of the process to know that you actually, it wasn't just luck that you won that President's Club, right? There were specific actions you took. And so when people come to me, I help them through that process. I help them develop those good stories. And in my book, I also have a timeline of how to write all it all out, to remember it all, and then how to keep it in front of mind so that they're telling a story that gives them enough detail and enough information. The hiring manager says, yes, this is my person.
That's awesome. And do you also do things like, I think one of the most difficult things to deal with is like resume, especially if you find yourself suddenly without a job. What do you recommend people do when it comes to a resume in the industry?
Yeah, and I've told people, I fix people's resumes, and I'm not a writing expert, but I'm a reading, I think, resume reading expert. So I know that I've seen so many resumes in my time, and I know that most people, when they look at one, they
Hmm.
spend probably less than a minute looking at a resume. And so the first thing I do when I try and help someone redo the resume is, hey, is it easy on the eyes? I just look at it. I'm like, okay, well, what's my first reaction without even reading a word? And you can see whether the margins are too wide. And there's so many different, a lot of people try and plug all these keywords into a resume thinking that, hey, they're going to get picked up by a computer. The more words I put, the better. But a lot of times in this day and age, people aren't using those computer models anymore. They're going on LinkedIn, they're networking, they're talking to other people in the industry, they're having an actual person read resumes and then take a look at them and see whether that's a person they want to look at. So it has changed quite a bit. Maybe other industries are still like that, but pharma has really changed in that LinkedIn really is the way that most people get found nowadays, or it's a networking thing. And if you're not doing those things, if you're not networking, if you're not on LinkedIn, if you're not really trying to get to talk to as many people as possible and get in through
So
that
how do you
way, it's going to be
differentiate
very, very
your LinkedIn
difficult
profile?
to
What
get
are
an
some of the
approach.
tips that you might give the listeners to think about as they're looking at their own profile? Yeah.
Yeah, great question. So the first thing is I start from the very top, and just the picture in and of itself is one thing that you don't need a professional picture. The iPhones today are better than most cameras were for 30, 40 years. And there's software you can use on an iPhone that will make your picture look professional, and you can get professional backgrounds on those, and you can do it yourself. You can take a selfie, but just look more professional. I just recently saw somebody who literally looked like they were in a bar. So I'm like, that's not a great picture to have when you're looking to
So one of
get a
our other
job in the
guests said,
pharmaceutical
she
industry.
would look at people's
Um,
profiles and she'd see their old pictures from college where people were doing a keg stand. So I guess it's kind of similar on LinkedIn, right? You probably don't want to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and also there's a picture behind the picture. So there's a landscape area where you can put another picture. And a lot of people don't put anything there. And I tell them, hey, spend the $20 or whatever it is, and go to Shutterfly or one of those accounts, buy a professional picture, and you can buy ones with quotes that really mean something to you. So if you have a quote that you love from maybe, George S. Patton or, Oprah, whatever it is, whatever that meaning is for you, put it up there because that shows your personality too. Um, so that's the start of it. What does it just look like from the beginning? Is it professional? And then another thing is a lot of people don't realize that right underneath their picture, you can change your profile heading to anything you want, and it'll default to whatever your current job is. So let's say it says account manager for XYZ Pharma. Well, when a recruiter is searching for their new sales specialist or sales representative out of, let's say, Tulsa, Oklahoma, they don't put account manager. They'll put sales representative. So you want to make it to what they're going to be searching for. And so, and especially if you've won President's Clubs, I always tell people put President's Club winning sales representative as your title, because a lot of times they'll do a search on President's Club winners, and that's what they're looking for. And so you can change that to anything you want. Another thing that I do is make sure that people don't put their resume on LinkedIn. It's a
Really?
huge mistake people make. Well, there's several reasons. Number one is it's not very safe from a private, information standpoint. A lot of identities are stolen, and they can get a lot of information off a resume,
Hmm.
and so you don't want that. Another thing is that it's out of your now control. And if someone can just download your resume, anybody can send it to anyone. Also, if the recruiter is looking for people, oftentimes they'll send out an email to you and say, hey, can you send me your resume? If you can just download your resume, they got no reason to contact you, and you don't even know half the time that they did, because many of these recruiters have it blocked that you can't even see who's visited you.
So your second book, and I'll quickly bring that page up so that people can see what that one looks like. Or not your second book. I guess I'm phrasing that wrong, because you've got 3 generations of your first book. Acing Sales Interview Questions, Insights from 50 President's Club winning sales managers. This one's great because honestly, it takes those star questions, and I have it up on the screen now. And what I found really exciting is it's available on Kindle Unlimited. So for anybody that subscribes to that, you can jump right into the book without having any expenditure. So I think that's great. But what I found really exciting about looking at that book is you see that these questions remain constant. So if you can get good at them with a resource like this, it means you can get good at handling, different stages of the interview. Tell us about how you came up with that, and what you think is important for the audience to glean from that.
Yeah, great question. And what I kept getting at from a lot of my clients was what are some of the top questions I'm going to get? And I didn't want to put all of those in the Acing Sales interview book. So, and also I didn't want to answer all those questions myself. I wanted to see what other sales managers thought, award-winning managers. I wanted this more to be what other people thought than what just I thought, because my original book was my thoughts and on how things should work. And my thinking was, well, if I could get other really successful managers to give me feedback. So it took me a while to write that book. It took me a long time to get people to respond, and to really then organize the best of the best and what I thought these answers were. And I figured, well, that would be the perfect combination. If I could get what are the things that could help people from resumes to LinkedIn to networking, and then really dive into what are those questions that they're going to get. I figured I'd have the perfect combination of 2 books. And I think what the feedback that I've gotten from a lot of people who've gotten both of them together have really helped them to answer all the questions that they're going to need. And then any coaching they need in between, they get to contact me. It's really been a good resource for them as well. And I also want to make a plug, if you don't mind, Scott, for the free stuff that I have on my website that really help people out, which I list out both pharma companies that I know of and medical device companies that I know of. And I list them in alphabetical order. And then I do direct links to each of those companies' job sites. And the reason I did that is because in my own search, I realized there's no place that just lists all pharma companies and medical device companies in one place that I can go back to and figure out, well, where have I applied? Where haven't I applied? And as long as you put your settings so that the changes color, when you click on something, you'll know whether you've been there or not.
What's the website to get to that?
So it's just my first name, last name.com. So it's Greg Novarro. And I always say Novarro because people usually spell my last name wrong. So it's just GREG, Novarro.
And we'll put a link if you're listening on our website on the episode page. At the bottom of the episode page is going to be Greg's bio and his contact info, and there'll be a link on there to the website too. So definitely go and check that out.
And that used to be, by the way, a paid service. But when COVID occurred, I thought, this is my way to give back, and I made it free after that. And that's going to be my pledge to everyone that, hey, those resources are free.
And it's obvious you're super passionate about this. So as you're thinking about where you're at in your journey right now, Any thoughts of a preview about what you might be thinking about moving forward, continuing doing what you're doing? Or are you going to add to your book collection, or where do you think you'd like to see yourself move?
Yeah, well, currently, it takes a lot of time, and I do limit myself each week because I do have 4 children. 2 are out of the house, 2 are still in the house, um, and a wife of 27 years. Um, and I currently have my role as a district sales manager here in Dallas Fort Worth area, and so I only do a few of these a week, and really try to limit how many I do, be just because of the time uh, needed to do it. And so, really, I haven't, just like this happened by accident. If another thought comes to my mind if I could find a resource that could help somebody out, who knows? Maybe I will. I never say never now. Um, but I could see myself, once I retire, of doing this full time, and probably that time could see myself taking it to another level. But right now, I love coaching people out in the field. I love helping people, where I am right now, and helping the people that need the help. And like before, I used to have, when I was not working and I was out of work, I did an unlimited service where I was having people that wanted my help for 4 months. They could pay for unlimited time for me. And to be honest, if I had continued to do that, I probably didn't have to go back into pharma because I was so busy. But it did get to be too much, and I wanted to be out in the field. I wanted to be out coaching people, and so that could be something maybe I do in the future, where I just 100% coaching for people interviewing. But we'll see if that
You know,
happens
the
someday.
what you're doing by providing that free resource on the site is really so valuable. I mean, that's one of the reasons why John and I, started the project here, is because it's
Hmm.
interesting. If you're looking for a new job, a lot of times it's because you've been displaced by your current one. And so you're displaced, you're working on a limited income, and you look for resources. And, you know, there are websites that have these resources for people looking for a job, yet you have to pay for everything on there. And so it's kind of ironic that you're without a job on a limited
Yeah,
resource, but they want $59 a month to see job postings. And then there's a recruiter on the other side of those job postings that ends up getting paid a good amount of money from an organization that's looking for the candidate. So it just didn't seem to make sense. And we said,
yeah,
eventually we'd love to have a hub on our website, kind of pointing to resources like what you're talking about here, and building from there. So if there are any recruiters that happen to be listening and you want to help us build out that project, reach out to us. But Greg, I've got a question for you. So we had a previous guest on that is a kind of a career consultant, talking about rebranding yourself and whatnot, a little bit different than what you're doing. And one of the things that she highlights is that we're in the midst of the great resignation. So people that are unhappy and feel a certain way, and they say, I don't have to feel this way anymore. Life has taught me a lesson that, certain things are more important than others. Um, so there's that going on. And then there's also this, what our industry likes to call right sizing going on across, the industry, with changing to from more forward facing people to maybe trying to reach people remotely and different resources. So what are you seeing is going on in the industry right now, and how is that changing what you're telling people?
yeah. Great question, Scott. What I have seen especially from COVID, right, and the people going to virtual calls, and all the changes that have happened in the industry, there's a couple of good things that I saw that came out of this, which is I believe representatives are always going to be needed. That was one thing that happened, where not only at my current company, but other companies, once reps were
Yeah.
pulled out of the field, sales plummeted. And it wasn't just because doctors weren't seeing patients, they were seeing them virtually. Sales just plummeted. When we went back into the industry, sales took off again. So it showed and it demonstrated, gosh, there is a need for the sales rep. Well, then people got some of the idea, and I heard about this from some other companies out there, that, oh, well, we'll just hire virtual reps. Well, in order to just get those virtual appointments, you got to have someone boots on the ground to schedule those. You have to have 5 or 6 contacts in every single office. One isn't enough because that person could be gone. They could
Yep.
either get COVID, they could leave, they could quit. As you're saying, this isn't just happening in our industry. You have to have 5 or 6 people ready and there and at the moment. What I've also seen reps do really well is not just rely on the virtual call. They'll set up a virtual call, and guess what? Their computer goes out. So what I've seen a lot of reps do is do the virtual call from the parking lot of the place they're doing it at. If something goes wrong, they can contact one of their 6 contacts in the office.
Yeah.
Say, hey, I'm in the
Yeah.
parking lot. I can come in. It's amazing how many times that happens. Also, they can set up the lunch and get all their marketing materials in there and then go back out in the parking lot. So you can't do those things virtually. You can't, if you just have a virtual sales force, anything like that happens, you're done. A lot of times the doctors won't come to the virtual call, right? So if that relationship isn't there with that live person, so that it's not going to happen. So what I see happening is companies getting maybe this idea that they can go along that way and maybe save some money, but I don't think it's going to work. Many years ago, there was a company out there that tried to just do something like this, pay doctors to get on calls, and it didn't work. It sounded like a great idea. It sounded like a great way to save a lot of money, but it didn't work. What I see happening a lot more of is the relationship. If you've got a previous relationship built, it means a heck of a lot more in today's day and age than it ever has. Because if you just hire someone new, fresh out of college, not that there's anything wrong with fresh out of college people. We love those folks. That's what we all started a lot of times. But if you hire for that and you're looking to try and make headway really, really fast, and maybe you're even in a specialty arena, if that person doesn't have an established relationship, it's going to take a heck of a lot longer nowadays than it ever has because of
so
this.
Greg, let's say somebody joined your team who was brand new to the industry, right? They're taking their first sales position, and being the great manager that you are, you opt to mentor them and get them all set to go. What would be some advice that you'd give them? Like, say they don't have those relationships before. How can they accelerate that process so that they can get through and be effective in their job?
Well, what I love about today's youth, because my kids are today's youth. My daughter actually has she has 70,000 followers on TikTok. She runs her own TikTok. It's called, I'll give her a plug too. It's called @DallasHotspots, where she goes and goes around to all these different new places to eat or do recreational stuff, and they either pay her or they give her free stuff. Kids have realized a way to interact with folks in ways that I never even thought of. So TikTok is one of them, right? So these kids can figure out not only that, but through LinkedIn, through Facebook, through other avenues. Gosh, a lot of the people who are now becoming doctors are in that age. So they get it too. So they can reach those folks. If they can't see them, they can reach them through those avenues. Send them an Instagram. Hey, will you see me? I don't even know how to use Instagram, right? And they'll get this. And I've seen this with new reps in the industry. They're like, hey, how are you getting to see that doctor that's a no-see? Oh, I'm friends with them on Instagram, and I sent him a message, and he said, come on in, right? And so in our day and age, it was so hard just to get somebody's cell phone number.
Greg, this sounds like a new book, man. Here's a whole new topic, right?
Yeah, I gotta get my daughter to write it, I guess. But yeah, I mean, it's unique and creative ways to get in and meet with people and understand them and connect with them in ways that we never thought.
So where do you think, the industry is going over the next 5 years? I mean, we've seen some statistics that say there's actually going to be a drastic increase in opportunities in the biotech space. That there's a lot of new targeted therapies that are coming out, so you're going to have these really highly specialized rare disease type positions, and the era of maybe the blockbuster where it was like Merck and Pfizer going head to head in some blockbuster kind of thing, and it was share of voice. What do you
Yeah.
see changing, and where should people be thinking to start to put their eggs, and what type of basket?
Oh, that's a great question. And I obviously am not an expert on this of where the industry is going. But from what I've seen from just from the past few years, you're exactly right. The blockbuster, the primary care $2 to $5 billion drug just isn't there anymore. Um, Specialized medicine also, if you really look at and talk about and see the biologics that have come out, have changed the industry. If you look at different classes, and once a week therapies are becoming really big. The once a month therapies, people thought, or even twice a year therapies, they didn't take hold because yes, the efficacy might be there on a once a year or once a month therapy. The problem is the side effects stay there too. So if someone has a negative side effect from a once a month product, chances are that's going to show itself and be more of a negative thing than something that you take every day or even once a week, because those things are gone. CGRP compounds are a good example of that. The once a month CGRP drugs that came out that were injections, they didn't do great because those side effects are very, very difficult for a migraine sufferer. However, the CGRP pills are killing it because the side effects just aren't there as much and they'll out of your body within 24 hours. So that was just one example of some blockbuster medicines that have come out where what sounded great was once a month therapy didn't work out quite well like they thought. So specialized medicine, I believe the injections, the self injectors have been incredible drugs. Where people can now take something where they don't have to do intramuscular. They can just do a self injection. It doesn't hurt at all. I know that the testosterone drug is one of those examples. Some diabetes medications are that way too. Those have changed the lives of so many people. So I do see that there aren't as many pods out there either, right? That these has become much more individualized. You don't have to call on as many doctors to actually make impact. And I see that a lot of companies have really isolated themselves to different disease states and they're sticking with those, whether it be oncology, diabetes, GI, and anything that's not making them anywhere between a couple 100 million and a billion, they're just getting rid of. It's not worth it for them anymore. I hope that I don't know if that really answers your question completely, because if I did have the answer, I would be a incredibly wealthy person to be able to know where everything is going. But just watching things and see how things have changed over the years, you can see that definitely the specialization is there, and looking for companies that are trying to make lives better for patients and not just come out with these blockbuster products at all costs.
That
So
was awesome. So let's go back into the interview. So I know, you know, uh, an interview question that I always get every single interview. I guess I muddled my way through them because I've been pretty lucky in my career. But the one that I think is one of the hardest ones to answer is the um, tell us something that your manager would say you need to improve on, or tell us something that's a negative. So why don't you attack that one? We'll,
yeah.
we'll just pick that. Why don't you attack that one? Because I know I hear from a lot of people, how the heck do I answer that question without, looking foolish or without. So go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I made an actual LinkedIn post about this, and it's the answer that people are afraid to give, but they shouldn't be, is that they're trying to improve on their selling skills. And the reason why they're afraid to give that answer is because they're thinking, well, the manager's going to, if I say I need to improve my selling skills and I'm supposed to be a salesperson, why would the hiring manager hire me if I have to improve on selling skills, which is a logical thing to think about. However, I always use the analogy of Tom Brady. As much as I hate Tom Brady, I love the guy because he's just absolutely incredible. And what does Tom Brady work on every single day? His feet. You would think after 24 years or whatever, how many years he's done it, that he knows where to put his feet. Well, he works on that every single day. It's like the first thing he does is his footwork. Well, why does he do that? Because he wants to be the best and he wants to have it be muscle memory. And even though he knows how to do it, he practices it every day because he wants to beat everybody else. He focuses on the basics. He focuses on the things that are going to make him better. And we are salespeople, and what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to be great at selling, right? So if you're working on great questioning, if you're working on how to handle objections, if you're working on the pre-call planning aspect of your selling skills, that demonstrates that you want to be the best. And guess what? If you think you're already there, then you're wrong. You're not going to be there. Selling is a skill and an art, and it keeps changing. It's just like football. Football keeps changing. Well, our industry keeps changing, and unless you're constantly working at this, you're never going to be the best. And it's interesting because the people who reach out to me often are great salespeople. I get people with 4 or 5 presidents clubs who reach out to me and say, hey, I want to nail this interview. I want to do it the best. I'm not surprised they're reaching out to me, right? Because they want to get even better at demonstrating their skill sets. Yeah. And so I tell people, if you get a question of, hey, what are you working on? What are you trying to improve? Don't be afraid to say, I'm working out my selling skills. And here's what I'm doing. Here are the books that I'm reading. Here's what I try and do every single day to be a better salesperson. I'm working with my manager to different questions to ask, different closes. I work with other people. That's a great answer. And if you can use an analogy with it, how many times do people in NBA basketball work on free throws? Every day. Well, they're in the NBA. Shouldn't they be able to hit a free throw 100% of the time?
So I bet you every manager listening right now in the next few months is going to hear a Tom Brady analogy when this comes up. That's my guess. Yeah.
Well, another one, Scott, is that I get a lot for those people who haven't won a President's Clubs. How do I explain that? And I use Dan Marino on that one. Right? Yeah. Everybody knows who Dan Marino is, right? Dan Marino's in the Hall of Fame. Never won a Super Bowl, did he? Should he be in the Hall of Fame? Well, yeah, he is in the Hall of Fame. Was he a great quarterback? Yes, one of the best. But he never won a Super Bowl. So I bet you anybody would want Dan Marino on their team, even though he didn't win a Super Bowl. So it takes a lot, right? So winning President's Clubs isn't easy. Sometimes it does take some luck. But when you get those people who've won 4 and 5 and 6 of them, well, they're doing something.
Yeah, it's definitely, I love to give analogies on interviews, and it's good to hear from you that that's an okay thing to do.
Absolutely.
So, we're getting up on 45 minutes, and I feel like we honestly just touched the tip of the iceberg here. Oh, yeah. First of all, I certainly hope you'd be willing to come back on and dig into some other things, and maybe when you get your next book out, you can come on and talk about it with us. But it would be fair, I think, as we get ready to close out the interview, to ask you one last question. So, what's the tip that you can give to somebody at the highest level of closing out that interview? Let's tie it into that.
Well, and it's interesting that you asked that because one of the things that I try and teach is try and connect the start to the end. So any great selling, you start out a conversation, you're going to bring back typically some of the things you talked about maybe earlier in the conversation and use that at the end of the conversation. So one of the things I tell people all the time is, and it's in my book, a lot of people miss it, they forget about it. When you open up the conversation, ask, hey, and I stole this from somebody else, this didn't come from me, which is, hey, what was if you didn't mind, can I ask you a question? That's another thing to always remember in the beginning. asking the permission to ask this first question, because people who do this oftentimes mess it up by not asking that. So ask for permission. Can I ask you a question before we start? Now they're intrigued. Yeah, what is it? Hey, what was the reason why you even wanted to talk to me today? And that one question will tell you a ton. And it also gets them to say positive things about you. Well, whatever they say in the beginning, oh, Scott, I wanted to talk to you because, I saw you had experience at 4 different companies. You were in the disease state they were looking for. You've won several awards. Great. Remember that, write it down, do whatever you can. At the end of the interview, bring it back. Hey, at the start of this interview, you said you wanted to talk to me because you said I, had the experience you were looking for. I won awards, and you said that I've been very successful, and that was the reason why you want to talk to me. Then close it up with, hey, what have you now learned about me? What are some of the competencies that you think I've now demonstrated that now make me an even better candidate than when we first started this conversation? If you get them to answer that question and they say positive things about you, you've got them, right? They've saying positive things. They're agreeing with you. Now they're pulling out those competencies that you were able to show. Now it's an easy close. Hey, it sounds like we're on the same page. You told me the next step in the process is this. Let's set that up right now. It makes it logical, right? It doesn't make it awkward. Now, if they don't have good positive things to say, you didn't do a good job in the end.
Well, maybe you have a chance to fix it before the end of the interview.
That's right. But it's kind of connecting the two, the start and the end. And if they don't figure out at that time what you did, they'll figure it out when they hang up that phone. They're going to say, hey, you know what? That was pretty slick.
Well, Greg, I mean, I think in the time we've been together, I think, and I would be surprised if the listeners out there aren't saying good things about what you've had to say today, because I did. I learned a lot. The whole time I'm sitting here saying to myself, I got to talk to Greg when we get offline, check out my LinkedIn profile, work on my CV, all that kind of stuff. So great job in what you're doing out there. I think you're offering a really great service, and really, really super just to get these pearls of wisdom, because they're not so common. So thanks so much for that. We really appreciate you spending time with us today.
Thanks, guys. And don't forget, you better
That's true. That's true.
You're going to be in trouble if you don't.
On behalf of the podcast team of Dr. Walsh and myself, Greg, again, thank you for joining us. To anybody that's listening, please, this is a must. You have to go to our website, thebiotechproject.com, click on the episode link, and just connect with Greg. Even if you just connect with him on LinkedIn, I read his posts all the time. I've actually sent colleagues of mine to Greg, and they've all ended up landing the jobs they wanted to land. And I love seeing Greg's always posting his Hire Day Friday posts, and I see those. So see, Greg, I really am on there. And I think, yeah, so I think there's a lot folks can get from them. So definitely make sure you're following Greg. Make sure you follow us, like us, check us out on YouTube at The Biotech Project. Check us out on LinkedIn at, this one's a little more complicated, The Biotech Proj, Proj on LinkedIn. On Twitter, and on LinkedIn at The Biotech Project, as well as on Facebook. Get the latest information, and most importantly, keep checking out our website as we grow. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we can't wait to bring you the next episode soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
You've been listening to The Biotech Project. Scott and John have 50 years of combined expertise, with roles that have covered everything from frontline sales to senior vice president of medical affairs. Scott and John are industry veterans, equipping you with knowledge from guests in every role from CEO to sales, recruiters to hiring managers. We hope you've enjoyed the show, and we hope you've gotten some useful and practical information. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, check out the website at www.thebiotechproject.com. And for questions and comments, send an email to hosts@thebiotechproject.com. See you next time.